The noon sun cooked Copperbrush Crossing until the air itself seemed to blister. Yet the crowd outside Leanwind Church ruin roared for blood as if the heat only sharpened their hunger. They dragged Naya Lanita into the open, wrist-bound, chin lifted in a defiance that only made the mob howl louder. Dust streaked her cheekbones, and her dark eyes held the hard shine of someone who had survived too much to kneel now. Jonas Hartwell stood at the edge of the frenzy, a silent shape in a battered coat, his limp catching the light each time the wind shifted. When Buck Reeves shoved Naya forward and spat his price, Jonas didn't argue. He simply tossed a pouch of silver onto the crate that served as a stage. The crowd gasped. Naya froze. Buck grinned, showing the rot in his teeth. "Enjoy your treat, Cowboy," she bites. Jonas stepped toward her anyway, and for the first time, Naya's breath faltered. Before we continue, please take a moment to support the channel. A simple like, a quick comment, or hitting that subscribe button helps these Wild West tales reach more people who love them. Let me know where you're listening from, and thank you for riding along with us. Copperbrush Crossing sat in a bowl of red earth and sagebrush, a place where the wind carried more dust than mercy, and where men believed justice could be bought by the pound. The afternoon light washed the street in a copper haze, drifting through warped saloon shutters, clattering against abandoned signs, and settling thick on the shoulders of anyone foolish enough to linger outdoors. The smell of sun-baked wood, spilled whiskey, and dry grass clung to everything, even the air that refused to cool. This was a town built by wanderers and held together by fear, a place where Apache tracks on the horizon could empty a whole tavern, and where men spoke of law only when it served them. Naya Lanita knew such places well. Dust clung to her braids, long and black like wet obsidian, falling over shoulders marked by days of running and nights without sleep. Her frame was lean from hunger, but steady, as if every bone had been carved for survival and stubborn breath. Beneath the grime and bruising, there was a sharp, unbreakable pride in the line of her jaw, in the way she refused to lower her gaze even when jeers rained over her like thrown stones. Her wrists, still red from the rope, trembled not with fear, but with fury contained too tightly in a body with no room left for surrender. The crowd saw a spectacle. Jonas Hartwell saw something else entirely. He kept to the shadows under the overhang of the mercantile porch, letting the commotion churn without him. His coat, dark leather beaten soft by years of weather, hung unevenly over a shoulder stiff from an old wound. A faint limp dragged at his right leg, a mark he carried from a past he never spoke of. Even from a distance, the way he held himself told a story a man used to long roads, empty nights, and decisions that never stopped echoing once made. He wore no badge now, but the straightness of his back and the measured stillness of his hands spoke of someone who once rode under rules that broke more than they protected. His eyes, gray as riverstone, followed Naya with a quiet intensity that no one noticed. He had seen that look before, the defiance of someone who had been told too many times that their life was worth less than another man's entertainment. It stirred something old and unwelcome in him, something tied to a day he had tried for years to forget, a day when he had watched a woman not unlike Naya die because the law had chosen a different side. Naya sensed that gaze, though she did not understand it. To her, Jonas was just another man of this land, broad shoulders, closed mouth, and a silence that hid more than it revealed. Yet something about the way he stood apart, the way he didn't cheer or spit or jeer, unsettled her. Men like him usually waited until the end, when the mob lost interest, to make their own kind of claim. A small carved piece of wood peeked from his pocket, worn smooth at the edges, something he touched without thinking. She noticed it. He noticed her noticing, and for a brief heartbeat, the noise of copper brush crossing thinned into a single line of tension stretched between them. Neither understood it. Neither welcomed it, but neither looked away. The moment Jonas cut the rope from Naya's wrists, the crowd's roar shifted, no longer triumphant, but confused and insulted, like a pack that had been denied its kill. Naya pulled her hands back fast, eyes narrowing as if she expected him to replace the rope with something worse. Jonas didn't touch her again. He only tilted his head toward the alley behind the saloon, a silent command to move before Copper Brush Crossing remembered. It still wanted blood. She hesitated. Men who rescued Apache women rarely did so for reasons she could stomach. But the town square throbbed with danger, too thick to breathe. And when Buck Reeves shouted for someone to check if Jonas had cheated, the snarling response from the crowd made her decision for her. She slipped into the alley, keeping several paces behind him, her steps so soundless they barely stirred the dirt. Jonas didn't slow down, didn't look back. His coat swung with his limp as he led her past the water trough, past the shuttered blacksmith shop, toward the edge of town where the desert waited with its brutal, honest silence. Naya matched his pace, watching the way his shoulders stayed rigid but never aggressive. He walked like a man who hated crowds, but knew how to move through them without provoking a fight. Not fear, not dominance, something in between. When they reached the old corral fence, Jonas finally stopped. The wind slid between them, carrying the hot scent of sage and the distant creak of the church ruin. He turned just enough for her to see half his face beneath the brim of his hat. "You can head north," he said. His voice was low, steady, as if carved from the same stone as his gaze. "Or stay close till dark. Your choice." Naya's jaw tightened. "You bought me. Why pretend you didn't?" Jonas didn't flinch. "I bought your life. What you do with it is yours." She had heard lies dressed prettier than that. She folded her arms across her aching ribs, feeling the bruise where someone had kicked her earlier. "Men don't pay silver for nothing." "Most don't," Jonas said. "But I'm not most." That wasn't reassurance. It was a warning. A complicated one. She studied him. The way he stood with weight shifted off his bad leg, the cautious set of his shoulders, the faint exhaustion in his eyes. He didn't leer, didn't ask her name, didn't inspect her like a purchase. It was as if freeing her had been the entire transaction, and now he was already stepping away from it. "Why do this?" she pressed, voice sharp enough to cut. Jonas looked past her toward Copper Brush Crossing, where the echoes of jeers still scraped through the wind. "Because they were going to kill you," he said, "and I couldn't let them." Why, she insisted. A beat, then another. Does it matter? It did, more than he could know. But Naya wasn't used to answers, nor to men who gave none. She didn't lower her arms, but the tightness in her spine eased just a fraction. Behind them, hoofbeats stirred faintly far away, but growing. Jonas's eyes snapped toward the sound. "We move," he said. He strode ahead again, heading toward Desert Mule Trail. This time, Naya followed not because she had no choice, but because she understood that whatever chased them was worse than the silence between them. As they crossed the first ridge, Naya caught him touching the piece of carved wood in his pocket, his fingers curling around it like a memory too sharp to handle. She didn't ask. He wouldn't answer. But she stored the detail away, the way someone stores a spark in a land waiting for fire. Their steps fell into an uneasy rhythm, two strangers tied by circumstance, distance, and something neither dared name. Not yet. Night fell over Rattlespine Ridge like a curtain pulled quick and hard. The land turned black except for the faint silver wash of moonlight catching on the jagged spines of rock. Jonas pushed forward in silence, boots crunching softly, his limp more pronounced as the cold settled. Naya followed several paces behind, her breath steady but her chest tight with something she didn't want to name. She watched the way he placed each step carefully, scanning the shadows, listening for the smallest hint of pursuit. He never once looked back to check if she lagged, and that cut deeper than she expected. By the time they stopped near a crooked outcrop of stone, Naya's shoulders were burning. Jonas dropped his pack without a word, began clearing a space sheltered from the wind. She remained standing, arms folded, watching him with a bitterness she couldn't quite swallow. "You walk like you want to lose me," she said quietly. Jonas paused mid-motion, the flint in his hand catching moonlight. He turned his head slightly, but not fully. "I walk like I want to get us out of this ridge before someone finds our tracks." His answer landed flat. Practical, too practical. She expected something else, anything else. "You never look back," she pressed. "Didn't think I needed to." Naya stiffened. "Because you don't care if I fall behind." Jonas didn't respond right away. The silence swelled between them, heavy as heat before a storm. Finally, he crouched, stacking a few stones together as if the task allowed him to choose his words with care. "If you slow," he said, "you'll say so." She hated that response, hated how simple it was, hated how it assumed she trusted him enough to speak if she needed help, when she had spent a lifetime learning never to show weakness around men like him. She turned away, jaw clenched, and lay down near the rocks, but facing opposite him. Jonas didn't approach her, didn't bridge the space. He built the fire with quiet, competent movements, never letting flame reflect in his eyes. Hours later, Naya woke to the soft rumble of Jonas's voice, not speaking to her, speaking to his horse, tethered nearby. "Easy. Boy, I'm walking ahead for her, not away from her. Gotta be sure the trail's clear. Just gotta." Her breath caught. It was a confession never meant for her ears. Jonas was shielding her, not abandoning her, walking ahead so any bullet or blade would meet him first. Shame and something warmer curled inside her chest. She closed her eyes and pretended to sleep. But the wind had already shifted between them. At dawn, they left Rattlespine Ridge and made their way toward an outskirts settlement, Pinon Bend, where Jonas intended to buy supplies before heading deeper into the wild. The morning air tasted of dust and burnt cedar as they approached the lone trading post. Naya stayed close to the wall, her instincts sharpening when people stopped talking the moment she appeared. Inside, the stairs cut like thrown stones. Men muttered under their breath. Women pulled their children aside. The sting of it was familiar, but it had been a long time since it felt so naked, so pointed. Jonas kept his gaze low, his jaw taut, his shoulders drawn inward as if fighting something. He bought flour, jerky, cartridges. He didn't look at her, not once. The shame that rose inside her was swift and scorching. Outside, she stopped walking. Jonas turned a fraction, barely enough to acknowledge she wasn't behind him. "Do you think I taint you?" she asked, voice a low, controlled tremor. "Is that why you kept your head down? To hide from their eyes?" Jonas's breath hitched. Not loudly, but she heard it. "I kept my head down," he said slowly, "so I wouldn't kill one of them." Her heart stuttered. He lifted his hand, just a little. revealing fingers still trembling from restraint. They looked at you like you were less than them. I felt my hand go for the gun. If I looked up, if I said a word, I'd have shot someone. And then they'd hang you all over again. The truth settled between them, hot and raw. Naya exhaled shakily. You were angry. For me. Jonas didn't step closer. He didn't reach for her. He simply nodded once. A small, painful admission that felt larger than any gesture could. Don't mistake silence for shame, he murmured. Not from me, for the first time. She believed him. They continued south toward Buckwater Homestead, Jonas's forgotten refuge, tucked behind a sparse thicket of juniper and rock. The small cabin leaned to one side, weathered by years of solitude. Jonas pushed the door open and stepped back, letting her enter first. Inside, it smelled of dust and faint pine, the scent of a life paused and left waiting. You can take the room on the right, Jonas said. It's not locked. Never has been. Naya walked inside and noticed immediately no latch, no bolt, no chain. Her breath softened. Most men would lock the door to keep watch over what they bought. Jonas's gaze flickered. I'm not most men. Later. When night settled over Buckwater and the coyotes began their distant songs, Naya stepped quietly from her room. She found Jonas sitting outside, back against the wall, rifle across his lap, keeping vigil not because she needed guarding, but because he needed to guard. The firelight painted him in amber and shadow. She stood beside him, closer than before. This time, he didn't lean away. Between them, trust had begun its slow, stubborn bloom, quiet as a heartbeat, fragile as dawn, but real as the desert wind. The wind arrived first thin, metallic, sharp enough to sting the inside of the nose. Jonas felt it before he heard anything, that old instinct rising through the scar in his leg like a warning tap straight into bone. Evening had barely settled over Buckwater Homestead when he straightened from checking the corral rail, his gaze sliding toward the east. The sky there flickered with a brief shard of light, not lightning metal, catching sun. Hoofbeats followed. Naya stepped out of the cabin, brushing dust from her hands. She saw the change in Jonas's shoulders before she heard the sound herself. Her pulse kicked hard. Someone's coming. Not someone, Jonas said. Many. She moved beside him, her body stilling in a way that wasn't fear. It was recognition. Copper brush. Jonas nodded once. Callister doesn't let anything go. Least of all pride. Marshall Thorne. Callister had money to lose, a bruised ego to avenge, and an entire town convinced Naya belonged to its cruel spectacle. Jonas knew the man. Polished boots, empty soul, and a weaponized sense of authority. If he had ridden this far, he wasn't here to talk. Jonas grabbed his rifle and stepped beside the porch post. We take the wash, he said. Painted claws got cover if we're quick. Naya didn't waste breath arguing. She strapped her knife to her thigh, grabbed the spare canteen, and followed Jonas into the dusk. They ran through sagebrush, ducking low as hoofbeats thundered nearer and nearer. Dust rolled over the land like smoke. Jonas kept just ahead, clearing paths, pushing branches aside, never letting the gap between them widen. Naya stayed close, her breathing even, her feet moving in silent precision. The painted claw wash opened below them, a deep, winding scar of layered stone streaked in bands of crimson, gold, and ash. Jonas slid down first, bracing his fall on one knee, then looked up to steady her descent. She didn't take his hand. She didn't need to. But when her boots slipped on loose shale, He moved so fast his bad leg nearly gave beneath him. She caught her own balance, shot him a brief look, half chiding, half grateful. Above them, the first riders appeared on the ridge. Rhett Mallory's voice carried across the basin. "Hartwell, hand her over and maybe you keep that limp of yours instead of earning a second one." Jonas raised his rifle, sighted upward without firing. "Come down here," he called back, "and see how that works out for you." Mallory laughed. It was not a pleasant sound. Behind him, Conrad Vest pulled his bandana higher. Eyes narrowed, they had numbers 6 men at least, and the ridge gave them elevation. Jonas knew the odds. Naya knew them too. She stepped closer to him, fingers brushing the hilt of her knife. "If they want me, they'll have to come take me." Jonas's jaw tightened. "They're not taking you." The riders split, 2 peeling off left, 2 right, flanking with practiced ease. Dust rose behind them like the breath of some great animal. Jonas fired once, clean and deliberate, forcing them to veer off the slope. A bullet sparked against stone near his head in answer. He pulled Naya behind a jut of red rock. "This isn't like running through sagebrush anymore," he murmured. "This is a fight." Naya met his gaze. "Then we fight." There was no fear in her voice, only the fierce, quiet determination of someone who had survived too much to break now. Jonas felt something inside him lock into place, an old instinct. A vow reforged by fire and dust. The battle broke over the wash like a storm. Shots rang out, ricocheting against layered stone. Jonas moved with surprising agility, compensating for his wounded leg by choosing angles where he could brace against rock. Naya stayed low, reading the terrain faster than he could, calling warnings, directing him silently with gestures. Twice she pushed him aside before a bullet kissed the edge of his coat. Mallory and Vest came down the slope, firing as they advanced. Jonas's rifle jammed. Naya dragged him behind another outcrop, her breath sharp but steady. She pulled her knife free. "Not yet," Jonas muttered. "Clearing the chamber. Save that for when they get close." "They're getting close," she said. Jonas risked a glance. Mallory was less than 30 yards away now, grinning beneath his dust mask. Vest moved to higher ground, lining up a shot meant to end this quickly. Jonas exhaled, steadying his aim. But before he could fire, Mallory spurred forward, sliding off his horse into the wash. The man landed hard, boots skidding on loose stone. Naya moved first. She was a blur of motion, knife flashing, body turning with controlled precision. Jonas fired at the riders on the ridge to keep them back, each shot knocking shards of painted rock into the air. Mallory lunged for Naya, swinging the butt of his pistol. She ducked, slashed his forearm, spun away from his second strike. Naya, Jonas shouted. She didn't look at him. "I've got him," Vest fired from above. Jonas didn't think. He launched himself into Naya, knocking her behind cover. The bullet grazed his shoulder, burning hot through his coat. He bit down a groan and crawled forward to return fire. His shot forced Vest to drop flat, buying them a heartbeat. Mallory rose again, blood striping his arm. He snarled, charged. This time Jonas met him head-on. The 2 men collided, crashing into the painted strata. Jonas's injured leg buckled, but he fought with the grim force of someone who knew what losing would cost. Mallory slammed Jonas into the rock, fingers clawing for his throat. Naya's voice cut the air. "Jonas!" Jonas broke Mallory's grip, shoved him back. Mallory raised his gun too fast. Naya launched herself forward. Her knife arced once across Mallory's wrist, sending his weapon spinning. Jonas seized the opening, driving Mallory to the ground. The man hit the stone hard, breath leaving him in a violent shout. Above them, Vess realized the tide had turned. He backed his horse and fled into the gathering dusk, leaving Mallory bleeding in the dust. Silence fell over the wash, broken only by the hiss of wind through the layers of painted rock. Naya knelt beside Jonas, her breath trembling now that the danger had eased. His shoulder bled freely, and dust streaked across his jaw. She placed a hand on his arm, not guiding him, not steadying him, but grounding him. "You should have stayed behind the rock," she whispered. He met her eyes, breath heavy. "I wasn't letting him touch you." For a long, suspended moment, they stayed like that, bound by the fierce clarity of what had almost been lost, and by the unspoken truth neither dared name yet. The painted claw wash faded into soft blue as evening settled, the layered rock cooling beneath drifting shadows. Jonas leaned against the stone while Naya tore a strip from her own sleeve and pressed it to his bleeding shoulder. He hissed at the sting, but didn't pull away. Their breaths mingled in the narrow space between them, neither rushing to break the silence that had begun to feel less like distance and more like fragile understanding. "You lost a lot of blood," she said quietly. "I've lost more," Jonas answered, but his voice held no bravado, only weariness, and a hint of something softer when her fingers brushed his skin. When the bleeding slowed, she tied the cloth tight, her movements gentle, focused. Jonas studied her face in the fading light, the slight tremble in her jaw, the dust streaking her cheek, the steady determination in her eyes. She had fought beside him with a grace and ferocity that left him shaken in ways the wound could not. "Thank you," he murmured. Naya didn't look up. "For what?" "For saving my hide." He paused, swallowing. "For not running when things got ugly." She sat back on her heels, meeting his gaze fully now. "I told you. They would have to take me over my own body, over mine too," Jonas said. That hung between them heavy, real, unguarded. The desert wind shifted, carrying the faint scent of mesquite smoke. On the ridge, Mallory groaned once, then fell silent. Jonas tugged himself upright with effort. "We should move," he said. "They'll come looking when he doesn't return." Naya nodded, then touched his wrist before he could turn. "Jonas, why did you really buy me? And don't say because they would have killed me. That's only part of it." Jonas exhaled, long and low, as if he'd been holding the breath for years. "A long time ago," he began, staring at the wash below them. "I served under a marshal who believed justice was whatever made him feel powerful. We caught a woman Apache, wrong place, wrong time. The town wanted a show, the law gave it to them." Naya's breath stilled. "I tried to stop it," Jonas said, "but I wasn't strong enough. Or maybe I wasn't brave enough. I watched her die while telling myself it wasn't my fault. Then I spent the next years wishing I'd broken the rules sooner." His voice rasped like stone dragged through grit. "So when I saw you on that stage, I couldn't watch another woman die, because men like Callister needed entertainment." Silence pulled thick around them. Naya didn't speak for a long time. When she finally did, her voice was softer than he had ever heard it. "My parents died the same way, caught between lies and the kind of law that only protects one side. I ran for so long, I started thinking freedom was just the space between hunts." Jonas looked up sharply. "You shouldn't have had to. And you shouldn't carry a ghost that wasn't yours to start," she replied. He blinked. The words hit him harder than any bullet. They stood like that for a moment, two lives shaped by wounds they didn't choose, meeting at a place carved by wind and time. The tension that had haunted their steps began to loosen, strand by strand. Naya broke the stillness first. Come on, you're hurt. And Buckwater is the only place we can hide until you can stand straight again. Jonas managed a half smile. I stand just fine. When he pushed off the rock, he faltered. Naya caught his arm without hesitation. This time, he didn't pull away from her touch. They walked slowly through the dusk toward Buckwater Homestead. The sky deepened into violet, the stars brightening one by one as they approached the leaning cabin. Naya paused at the threshold. You said the door doesn't lock, she murmured. It never has, but you kept me safe even outside it. Her eyes softened. That matters. Jonas swallowed hard. You can go if you want, or you can stay. Either way, I won't close a door on you. Naya stepped past him into the cabin, turning back only long enough to say, I'm tired of running. The words were not a promise, but they were the closest either of them had come. Morning came slowly to Buckwater Homestead, the kind of dawn that rose without sound, brushing pale gold across the worn shingles and the thin line of smoke curling from the stovepipe. Jonas stepped onto the porch, arm bound tight under Naya's careful bandaging, and watched the first light spill over the distant slope of painted claw wash. The air was cool, carrying the faint sweetness of juniper, mingling with the scent of dust still clinging to their clothes. Behind him, the cabin creaked softly as Naya emerged. She walked with measured steps, not out of uncertainty, but out of something new, an unfamiliar gentleness. Her knife rested at her hip, but her hands were empty. She stopped beside him, close enough for their shoulders to almost touch. Quiet morning, Jonas said. Quiet feels different now, she answered. He glanced at her. She wasn't looking at the land. She was looking at the doorframe, specifically, at the way it remained open behind them, unlocked, unguarded. Jonas followed her gaze, understanding settling into him like warmth after a long winter. You can still leave, he said, voice low, if you need to. Naya studied him for a heartbeat, the rising sun catching in her dark eyes. Then she reached to her belt, unfastened her knife, the same blade she had used to defend him in the wash, and laid it quietly on the table beside the porch rail. I don't stay where I'm caged, she said, and I don't leave where I'm seen. She lifted her wrist, showing him the small welt left by the rope days earlier, now fading. You didn't buy me. You only bought time, and I choose what to do with it. Jonas felt the words settle into him like roots sinking into thirsty ground. He reached into his coat, withdrew the small carved piece of wood he had carried for years. Its edges were worn smooth. A sunburst cut into one side, the mark of a past he never found peace with. He placed it in her hand. Then I choose to start again, he murmured, if you'll stand beside me. Naya closed her fingers around the carving, holding it as if it were something living. The wind swept through the hollow, stirring the sagebrush and carrying the scent of early sun-warmed earth. From the ridge, a lone bloom of desert aster bobbed in the breeze, pale petals trembling in the rising light, something fragile growing where nothing should. By the time word traveled, folks no longer called the place Buckwater Homestead. They called it Wildbrush Hollow. For the woman who turned a barren ridge into something that could breathe again, and for the man who learned that love was not a claim, but a choice made every free dawn.